What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode here. My name is Blake, and today I've got a really fun special episode for you guys. Basically, I'm sitting down with 7 sheets of paper here, and I'm going to be trying to connect my entire philosophy of thoughts and ideas. So I've written down all of the ideas that I've been thinking about lately, all these different ideas that I've been writing about in their own isolated forms, and now I'm going to try and paint an entire picture where I connect this entire thing. And I have the thought, an idea that this will probably be a book someday. But this really is me challenging myself, trying to connect my entire philosophy of thought, all of these different ideas, in a way that hopefully will be really beneficial to you. So if you're new to the channel, my name is Blake. I'm 25 years old. I do life coaching, and I am also a creator exploring human potential. And for better or for worse, I am obsessed with ideas, with different ways of looking at life, with different frames, all in service of living a better life, of truly experiencing what is possible here on this finite human experience. There is a lot here, and let's get right into it. There's going to be no editing in this video. There's going to be many moments of real time figuring out my thoughts. So don't expect perfection. You're missing the point. But there's a lot of really good stuff here. And I think this will be fun. So encouraging you all to stick around and kind of be on this exploration with me as I am moving through this. So with that being said, let's get into it. So, the core of what I have been thinking about all circles around this idea that I firmly believe that we have been given broken maps for human development. So, what I mean by that is our culture has not prepared us and given us roadmaps to fully tap into our unique potential and to truly flourish as individuals, which we can't actually flourish, or we can't actualize our potential as a culture, as a society, as a civilization, as a species, if we're not able to do it as individuals. And there's so much that's happening right now with the mental health crisis and obesity and chronic disease and suicide rates and all of these different metrics that we can look at that really are pointing back to the idea that we're not doing so great, that our species is sick. That we are sick, and if you look at the charts, it's only getting worse. I'm not going to be pulling up charts or studies in this essay or in this video, but if you need convincing, I would just go Google any of the things that I just said and go down your own rabbit hole. But in short, we're not in Kansas anymore. Like, there's something that's going wrong, and everyone's looking at it in different ways. The health scientists will be looking at the health stuff and what we're eating and the disease in our body, and the psychologists are looking at psychological factors, and everyone's kind of studying the wound, studying the sickness in different ways. But I think that there is a core here, and this is something that someone like Dr. John Vervaeke, who created the entire meaning crisis, this is something that he would say, is that there's actually one kind of core crisis that is leading to all of these other crises. So there's a core crisis that is at kind of the mouth of the river that is flowing downstream into all these other streams of the wound, of the sickness that we are seeing. And I 100% agree with that. And I think one of the big wounds that we are seeing is this extreme lack of a developmental map. And there's a really important idea here, which comes from Bill Plotkin, which is the idea, and it's not just his idea, but this is something he talks about. This is a very common idea in many traditions, but that you don't just naturally go from child to adolescent to adult just through age. You don't become an adult just because you can start drinking. You don't become an adult just because you can start driving. There are deep developmental processes that need to happen to become a true adult. And unfortunately, that is extremely rare in our culture. So what we see is we see children living in adult bodies, and we wonder what's wrong. Like, looking at our government, for example, like so many of these people, like even Trump, and it's not pro-Trump, anti-Trump, but like he is a child in an adult body, and so many other people are. And that's a huge problem. That's a huge problem because we need a society of adults. But one of the kind of downstream effects that I think we can study the wound, which, by the way, so much of what I'm going to say, maybe to some of you watching this, is normal, is natural. But I think one of the big wounds of our culture is that we've been so normalized to the state of the world. We've been so normalized to these states of being that aren't healthy, that aren't normal. Or maybe they're normal, but they're not natural. They're not healthy. And so that's, I think, one of the big steps for a lot of people is like pulling your head out of the fog and being like, yo, that's not normal. Don't swallow that bullshit. Don't swallow that lie. And so one of the ways that we can look at the wound is, I think, in our modern workplace. And why am I so interested in talking about the workplace? I'm so interested in talking about the workplace because on average, people will spend 90,000 hours at work. That is 1/3 of your entire lifetime. So I think questioning how we spend 1/3 of our life is incredibly important. And if there are ways that we can spend that 1/3 in ways that are better than others, then we should do that. And if you think about it, those also tend to be our years of peak physical performance. And almost probably another 1/3 of our life were spent in school, which we didn't even choose. We didn't necessarily even have like ideas of what we would want to be doing differently, because that's just how it is. We go to school, we don't have a choice. And so then once we step out into the world, into this moment where now we have a choice, now we've gone through school, now what do we want to do? It's like, we should learn how to spend that 1/3 in a way that we're happy about, in a way that we look back on in our life and say, wow, I spent that 1/3 of my life in a way that I would do it over again in the same way, kind of thing. And the problem is most people don't like what they do. And again, this is a big idea that most people get really triggered by, but like most people go to a job that they don't care about so much beyond the paycheck. It's like, cool, maybe it's kind of fun or cool some days what they're doing, but if it wasn't the paycheck, then they wouldn't be doing it. And again, many people will hear me say that and say, well, that's really privileged of you to say, that you can think about your job more than just a paycheck. And it is. Sure, you can call that privileged. And there's many of you listening to this who have that same privilege. And so that's who I am talking to. But, and there's statistics on this. I think it's 55% of people at work are what they call quiet quitting, where they're not fully quitting their job, but they're completely disengaged. And, the thing is, I think that's a hard thing to study, but I don't think we need statistics to know that this is the truth. Like many of you probably have experience with your dad who comes home from work and just is not in a great mood and is stressed and isn't enjoying what they're doing. And so I think many of you can feel that this is true in some way, but the thing is that I think a lot of people have a hard time with when we're talking about this topic is we don't know that there's another way. Like we've never been shown another way. Growing up, you didn't have examples. I didn't know that there was anything else. I was just surrounded by a bunch of, dads who made a good amount of money, who seemed like they were enjoying it. They got together with their friends on the weekend. They watched sports, yada, yada, that sort of common pathway that we see now. That's all I knew. And it wasn't until later till I realized like, wow, there wasn't like a deep sense of aliveness in these people. Like I could feel that what they were doing was more than just about the paycheck. And so again, you don't know what you don't know. But yeah, just to double down on something here, I think many people don't acknowledge the work problem because we don't think that there's another way. And if we don't think that there's another way, then why would we acknowledge the problem? It's like if I peek behind the curtain and allow myself to feel the deeper place within me that isn't really stoked on what I'm doing, then um like if I'm going to do that, but there's no other solution, it kind of feels pointless. Like I'm just going to be stewing in this discomfort within myself. I'm just going to be looking at the fact that I don't like my life, but there's nowhere else to go. There's nothing else to do. So might as well just not look behind the curtain at all and try and enjoy my life as much as I can without, without letting that internal itch that knows something's wrong take over too much. And so something else that I want to speak to here that I have definitely felt recently a lot is, so I'm 25 and basically I had a crazy, 180-degree turn in my life when I was around 19. And I stopped talking to quite a bit of people from my past, from high school and stuff like this. Not necessarily intentionally, it just kind of faded away. But since reconnecting with some people recently who I used to be best friends with in high school, who used to feel so like alive and excited and whatever this like spark within people is like they had their spark. But since talking to them again, it literally feels like their light went out. And I know that sounds woo-woo or whatever, but that's how it feels. It's like, where did you go? It's like I'm knocking and like, who's in there? And even though I didn't say this, what I really want to say to them is, man, you don't feel excited about life. And, it's a big thing to say to someone, so I wasn't saying that, but that's how I felt. It's like, dude, what's up? And, they don't say that because, again, I think it's just this common thing where we kind of settle, where we say, we believe that this is just the best that it gets because we see everyone else around us who's doing the same thing, who also doesn't seem so stoked, but they're not saying anything about it either. And so we just assume that this is what we do. This is what our society does. This is what humans do. We grow up, we let go of the golden years of college where life was still kind of fun and we were enjoying things. And now we just get with the program, grow up, get with it, get the job that you don't really love. Put the smile on at the cooler during your water break and wait for the weekend where you can finally have some fun, where you can go back out with your friends, where you can go and, watch football on Saturday and Sunday. And then on Sunday, kind of start to dread going back to work. That's such a common thing. And again, this story that like, this is just the best that it gets. So get with the program, adjust, acclimate, don't complain because, there's nothing to complain about. This is just what we do kind of thing. And I can't tell you how angry that makes me because there is another way that we're going to get to. Shoot, there was something else that I wanted to speak to there. Anyway, this is part of doing it this style. I don't have everything written down. I have like bullet points. So, I know what I was going to say. So, why this is a big problem too, because for most of these people who are working the 90,000 hours, they're going to be working a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. And what I see so often is that people get off of work. First of all, they're not really doing anything before work. And sometimes it's 8 to 5 now. But they get off of work, or they're not doing anything before work besides getting up and going to work. They probably want to sleep as much as they can. And when they get off of work, they're too tired to do anything else. And maybe you get a workout and you eat, and that's about it. And then, when you get off, you want to scroll, you want to just watch Netflix, you want to like distract, right? You want to distract. And so, again, the problem is that over time, when you're doing something that you don't want to be doing and you're not enlivened by it, like you don't leave your day at work and you feel even more alive and your cup is even more full, Like all you want to do is just distract because, you want to numb that feeling of I'm not so stoked on my life, and you're craving any form of short-term pleasure, of quick release to the kind of um, dullness that you feel in life. And so that's the problem for me with the work thing, is because it extends beyond work. Like, because what we're doing at work, the majority of our day, is also going to be influencing what we're doing outside of work. Um, and then this is when people get caught in that kind of cycle where they're not really stoked on their life, but there's no way out, and there's no time to even think about a way out, because when they're at work, and then when they're not at work, they're too tired to really do anything else. Because what you could say is, okay, you start to work there, but then you're doing other work outside of your main job. When you get off of work, you're doing something else. Some people do that, but I think there's many people who don't. Most people don't, and they're too tired and exhausted to be focusing on something else. So that's the kind of problem that I see. And then it's this like trap. There's no way out, and then you spend 30, 40 years doing something like that. And that's a huge problem in my eyes. Because people aren't alive. Like, they're just slowly dying inside. And we're going to get into kind of the deeper problem of that. So again, I know that's a privileged problem, right? Like, you don't like what you do for work. There's other people and countries, but in the ripple effect of our species, like, I think this is a huge problem, because one of the other big problems that we see is like lack of critical thinking, and citizens of a government who are just pretty kind of just like sheep, going along with everything and not really relying on their daddy, the government, whatever, to come and save them. And so basically we have a bunch of people who are out of service, like a vending machine's out of service. They can't do anything. It can't serve anything up. And that's the thing, is like, we can look at all of these world problems. We can look at all of the things that are going wrong. But for me, where I come from is like, it starts with the individual. That none of it really matters if, as individuals, we're doing horribly, if our life is in shambles, if our life is full of destructive habits, if we're always too exhausted to do anything productive and to do anything that feeds us on a deep level. And so for me, I always come back to the individual, because I see many individuals, for example, who are not doing good in their life. Their kind of metaphorical garden of life is full of weeds and polluted, and they spend their entire time like focusing on world issues. They spend all their time listening to political podcasts and talking about these global problems, and like, it's not helpful. And they think that it's being helpful because they're focusing on these big world problems and they're talking about it, but they're not in government, they're not doing anything, and their life is in shambles. And I think they miss something there. And I think part of it is a defense mechanism, because it's a lot easier to pretend that you're making a difference by basically drowning in the news than it is to look at your life and start to clean it up. Like, that's a lot harder. But for me, again, it always comes back to the individual. I don't spend that much time on the news because I'm so full on with my own life, and like, I've got a lot of shit to do myself. And I think there's a balance to tuning into world events where it, at some point, it's just not helpful anymore. I think people are overdosing on world news, to be honest. So it comes back to the individual. And the problem for me with our culture is, again, we have lost developmental maps for the individual to become who they are, to unfold into their potential, to fully blossom into what they are here to do. And I'm going to introduce an idea, and then I'll kind of explain something. So my philosophy that comes from James Hillman, that comes from people like Carl Jung, one of the most famous psychologists in history, is the idea that each of us has a blueprint within us. And so what in this blueprint was planted in us when we were born. And so it's not something that we got from our environment or from our parents. This is who we are. And I think this is why we see certain children who come in and they're naturally inclined and gifted or really interested in a certain thing that their parents didn't do. You know, that's an example of it. Not all of us have that experience, though. But the idea is that there is something within us that goes beyond our environment, our conditioning. This is what many people would call a soul. Now, I think that word sends a lot of people in the wrong direction and it turns a lot of people off. So I like to think about it more practically. And so my honest opinion is that we are not just here random, everything is a coincidence that happens and we are basically just trying to like survive and piece together some life that we kind of like. I think that there is a path that is unique to each of us that is trying to unfold. So the metaphor here is that the acorn wants to become the oak tree, and there is already the image of the oak tree within the acorn. Like the blueprint for the oak tree lives in the acorn the entire time, and it knows how to become the oak tree. It knows what to do. And so that, I think, is the same way that humans are created. And if you think about it, it makes sense. If we can get over this horrible idea that somehow humans are completely separate, that we are the aliens on planet Earth, that every other species of planet Earth is they are connected. They are all organizing around the same kind of forces, that they are adhering to the same laws of nature. But then somehow humans are different. Somehow humans are better, that we live outside the laws of nature. Now, the nuance here is that humans are different. We are very unique compared to every other species in our level of consciousness, which is our prefrontal cortex, is this big new area of our brain that we have access to now. And so what that did, which it allowed for complex thought, it allowed for us to perceive ourselves and perceive our surroundings. But really what it allowed us to do is to go beyond our mere like biological hardwiring and to have conscious thought, to be able to observe. That's really the essence of our species. We have the ability to observe. And I love this story that Zach Bush told, where he was in Africa and he was looking at one of the most amazing sunsets on the savannah. And he was just in awe, as humans do. When we look at something like the sunset, it's such a universal thing that we experience a sense of awe and beauty and wonder for life. And what he says in the story is, when he looked around, he saw the birds flying overhead and he saw monkeys in the trees. But they weren't looking at the sunset. They were just doing their thing. They were just going about their life. And he talks about how he really felt that that's the purpose of our species. Like, we are the species that appreciates everything around us. We are the species that gets to feel gratitude and gets to witness beauty and observe beauty. And again, it's not better or worse. It's just who we are. Like, we're all playing out different roles and functions on Earth, interspecies, but also humans versus humans and monkeys and birds. Like, we're all playing a different part within the kind of global Earth ecosystem. And we're the only species that we know of that appreciates sunsets and feels gratitude and this sort of thing, because we have the capacity to pause and observe everything that's happening around us. All of life, all the other species, they're just fully immersed in the movement of life. Humans, we can pause and observe the movement of life. Okay? And what's happened, and one way to, I think, look at the wound is that within that observation of life, at some point, we started to see ourselves as separate. And we started to feel like, okay, now we need to protect ourselves from everything else around us. We need to control everything. We need to minimize any sense of the uncontrollable, which is life. And this is a whole rabbit hole that I'm not going to go down super deeply right now because of time, and it's just a whole other conversation. But, biologically, we select for control and certainty and this sort of stuff and want to minimize potential threats. Now, at one point, humans were completely still like hunter-gatherers, for example. They had to move with the seasons. They were moving. They were looking at the wind patterns and the weather patterns, and they were responding and this sort of thing. And they were, having to move with the seasonality of their local ecosystems in terms of food. What food was growing? Where was the food growing? They had to be in communication. They had to be in conversation with their environment, right? And if you look at our society now, you can see a society that basically has selected for a lifestyle where we don't have to be in conversation with that. You don't have to study the weather patterns. You turn your AC on, you turn your heat on. You don't have to be in conversation with your local ecosystem for food. You go to the grocery store and it always has everything that you want, pretty much. And obviously I'm talking about a very specific kind of person, but like in the States and whatnot, this is the case. And so we can see this on many levels where there is no conversation there anymore. Because in order to be in conversation or to be in connection with someone else, with a friend, or with nature itself, with life itself, there has to be a sense of trust. And part of that trust is trusting in the unknown, because we don't know what nature is going to do. We don't know what the other is going to do. And it's easier, like in a relationship, just to close yourself off, to say, I don't trust, so I'm going to push you away. That's kind of what we've done. It's kind of what we've done to the earth. So, wow, I just went down an entire rabbit hole. So let's bring it back for a second. So we were talking about the idea of your blueprint. Now, that is an idea that probably sounds super foreign to a lot of you. You're like, what are you talking about? Blueprint? What do you mean? And that is because culturally, the idea of each of us having some unique path, some unique life that is wanting to unfold, that's a foreign idea. It's a completely foreign idea. And in a healthy culture, what would happen is that the role of parents, the role of the environment, the role of culture would be to help that unique path unfold, to be curious instead of telling them what to do. Instead of saying, this is who you need to be, we would say, I wonder who you are. And so this takes us into the educational system. So a couple things here. The root word of education comes from the Latin word educare, which means to draw out. Okay? And this comes from like the ancient Greeks, who were, pretty dialed in when it comes to education, philosophy, society as a whole. Like they had a lot of things figured out, and I think they had this education thing figured out. They knew that the essence of education was to draw out the unique gifts and intelligence that we each carried. That it was less of a filling in with facts and more of a drawing out and nurturing what that is within us. So you can think about the blueprint there, or you can kind of think about a seed. And so if you're thinking about it like a seed, then really the job of education was to identify different parts of that seed and then to water that, to feed it sunlight, to nurture it into the oak tree, into whatever it wanted to become. And our educational system has gone so far from that. So if you study our current educational system, it was created and based on the industrial factory system. So during the Industrial Revolution, this is really where the roots of our modern educational system come from. And the goal of the educational system, which this isn't some big conspiracy or something, it's at the time it made sense, was to create factory workers, was to create people and teach people skills so that they can go into the factory day by day, they can clock in and they'll do their job. They'll be good factory workers. They'll follow their orders. They'll do their job on the assembly line. They'll be very docile. And that's that. And we still have that. And it's super outdated. And the problem, I think, with this model of education and that is that it is entirely about filling up. So if the root of education is about drawing out, our educational system now is all about filling in. We don't care about who you are deep down. We just want to give you the facts. We want to help you become someone who follows orders. And so I love to think about it like our culture wants factory workers, not visionaries, not critical thinkers. And so we're never taught how to critical think. We're never given the proper nurturing to even know, how am I different from all of my peers? What makes me unique from all of my peers? What am I good at that other people aren't as good at? What am I uniquely interested in and curious about that others aren't? Some people get that naturally, but most people don't. And I love this quote that comes from Seth Godin, who's a incredible marketer, and he talks about how, or the quote says, like in my entire educational experience, for first 18 years of my life, or whatever, I was never asked a question that they didn't already know the answer to. So we're never asked a question that they don't already know the answer to, right? It's all quizzes. It's all fill in the blank. It's yada, yada, yada. Whereas the root of education is asking questions that we're just curious to hear from someone else about. We don't know the answer to. That's where the unfolding process was supposed to happen. And so because that's kind of like the mold of our culture that we're stuck within, that was our parents too. And so they never had the kind of nurturing to unfold their own blueprint, to connect with their uniqueness. And so of course they don't know how to do that with us when we're growing up either. And so anyway, that's also why it's so easy for so many people to get caught on this beaten path, to get caught kind of on this rat race of climbing the ladder, because we've never had an experience of like touching our uniqueness, of understanding what we actually like, what we're drawn to, what we want to do. And so then we just get lost on the beaten path, doing what everyone is supposed to be doing, what everyone around us is doing. And so we follow that. And then when we get to college, it's like, we're asked, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? What do you want to do? And I think what happens is that for many people, they just continue on the beaten path. They don't really know what they want to do, but they know that my dad did business. I'm going to do business. Everyone around me is doing blank, or our society celebrates these kinds of roles, so I'm going to do this. But then there's also a lot of people who are just like, I have no clue. And it makes sense to me because our entire life, we've never been really asked what we want to do. We've never been asked for our unique ideas and opinions. And so then once they finally ask us, it's like, I have no idea. And so that's kind of where we're at. And again, if you're listening and you're saying to yourself, like, I don't know about this whole blueprint thing, whatever, it's so foreign. I get it. I know how foreign of an idea that is, but my lived experience, so many people I've talked to, so many books I've read, so many people I've worked with, like, I fully believe it. And it makes sense. It makes sense. Like, this is also what separates, I think, humans from other species, is that we do have this, like, our capacity for like unique expression. And so and I could sit down with you in 5 minutes and we'd figure this out. Like, each of us has unique interests, has unique curiosities, has a unique taste. Like, when you watch a movie and I watch a movie, there's going to be different characters that stand out to us more. There's going to be different scenes that land better than others for you. There's going to be certain songs that really touch you, that don't touch me as much. As we pull on that thread, as we follow that, we as we pay more attention to those sorts of things, over time it'll start to expand and grow. You can almost think about it like you're pulling on a piece of yarn that's connected to this big spool of yarn. As you pull on the yarn, more of the spool reveals itself. That's kind of how the blueprint is. And so we're following we're following the thread. So, everything that I just said, I'm sure you can get down with, right? Curiosities, interest, they're unique to you. But you also have unique gifts. There's things that you're uniquely good at that you don't have to necessarily try to be good at. It's just natural to you. And so as much as you want to think that all of what I just said comes from your upbringing and whatnot, I really think there's certain parts that don't, that are just, it's just like you. It's like your unique fingerprint. And so for me, part of this kind of new way of being, this new developmental map, is one where your unique fingerprint is at the center. That it is the heart of all of it. And that's what we're following. I'm realizing I kind of need to speed run the rest because I don't have as much time as I thought I would. So all of this to say, what tends to happen, because I believe life, whatever you want to call life, whatever the force is that is making the grass grow, that is making the acorn become the oak tree. I think about it like if you imagine the earth from outer space, it's like there's an outlet coming out the side of it and it's plugged into something. Whatever the energetic force is that it's plugged into, that is coming through literally everything, it wants you to live in alignment with that unique path that is you, that so many of us have been disconnected from, that so many of us have never really touched. And in order to get people to start to align with that, in order to nudge people in the direction, it'll often bring us certain experiences, certain people that are trying to point us in the direction. And I love this idea that life speaks in feathers, bricks, and freight trains. If we don't listen to the feather, it's going to bring us a brick. If we don't listen to the brick, it brings us a freight train, which are like these rock bottom experiences. But how many stories have you heard of people having rock bottom experiences where that is the thing that they needed in order to start finding who they really are? They're finding their life. This is how life is trying to communicate with us. And I think this is a big part of dis-ease. If we're not able to just say, okay, I know I'm out of alignment, I'm going to try this. Sometimes life needs to bring us these big experiences, which is what happened to me my freshman year in college. And so life's not angry at you. Life's not judgmental. Life is trying to help you to align with who you really are and your path. And so that's where many people are at. And my invitation is say yes. When your life's starting to crumble and you can feel that things are going to have to change, say yes, because there is an intelligence to that crumbling. There is an intelligence to the moment of being lost, admitting that you're lost, admitting that you don't know who you are anymore. That is the starting place of something new. That is the first domino to fall. So I think what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to pause here because I don't have enough time to go through the rest. But basically, we just covered all of part one, which is the wound. Everything that I'm about to get into is what now, right? What do we do now? Okay, you've addressed the wound. You've addressed that something's not working. And maybe you finally admitted to yourself that, like, I can't do this anymore. Now what? That is such a precious, fertile moment that we're going to be getting into on the next part two of this. But I love this idea that sometimes in order to find your way, you have to admit that you're lost. And thank God for it, because this is not just some other time on earth. This is a crazy-ass time. This is a time where we need people making courageous acts. This is a time where we need more than ever people who are able to show up, people who are able to be of service. And that starts with you. That starts with your life, tending to your garden, taking care of yourself, learning how to thrive in your life so that you can be of service, so that you can show up for what's happening right now in the unique way that only you can. So thank God for it. Mary Oliver, what is it that you plan to do with this one wild and precious life? Like, I didn't come here to settle. I didn't come here to experience some mediocre, okay life because apparently that's the best that it gets, because apparently there's no other way. It is what it is. It's like, fuck that. Fuck that. I know that is the common stereotype. That's like the mainstream narrative of life as you grow up. But that doesn't mean it has to be that way. That doesn't mean that it is the best that it can get. That just means that's the habitual pattern that our culture is stuck within. And guess what? It ain't working. So it's time to flip the narrative and start searching for something new. And there are ways and there are people doing it. And maybe it just starts with calling bullshit on that story in the first place. So that's what I got for now. If you stuck around, I appreciate you for being here on this crazy ass windy road, for sticking with me through all of the brain farts and all the things in between. And this is an open source conversation because I'm trying to figure it out just like you're trying to figure it out. And I feel like I have certain things that I believe, and I have things that I have found that work in my own life. And like, let's help each other out. You know what I mean? So leave a comment. And if you like this video, please leave a like. It helps. And if you liked the video, subscribe so that you can see when I'm posting more, so that we can continue having dope conversations together. And that's that.